Hello, this is Paul's Church, and my name is Nash. So, we're going to take a break from talking about the aspects of love for this week, and we're going to throw the bone a little bit. There are certain topics that always bring a lot of people to the table to want to voice their opinion about, and I guess it's my turn. um, but this isn't so much of an opinion, but maybe a direct um, instruction guide, you could say, on how to use the Bible to confirm your beliefs, as long as they are Bible based. What do I mean by this? Well, first, the name of this message, I named it Simple Truths. And yes, homosexuality is a sin. And now I'm not going to put that second subtitle into the description for obvious reasons. I don't want people to be here to get ammunition to condemn other people of their sins. It's not what we're supposed to do. If you know, Paul talked about grace, and I will be talking about that more personally here in upcoming weeks. But all that to say, this isn't a way for you to become the next Andrew Wilson or Jay Dyer or Ben Shapiro. Okay? This is how I use the Bible to confirm simple truths that come from the Bible. All right? So, first, I want to say you don't have to be a scholar, you don't have to be a pastor, you don't have to be a theologian. If one verse is all you need with proper exegesis, we'll get into that, then one verse is all you need. What do I mean by that? Did Jesus walk on water? Find the one verse in the New Testament where it talks about, yes, in fact, Jesus did walk on water. That's it. You don't need historical proof. You don't need scientific proof. We don't talk about that stuff. We are not justified by the reasons of the world. We are justified by the word. What is the word? This is where I lose Orthodox and Catholics. The Bible, as far as I know, is the simplest collection of truths and guides that we can apply to our lives that are absolutely true. Meaning, if you did exactly what the Bible tells you to, you would reach sanctification as a Christian. Now you need to know how to read the Bible, and that can get really uh, dividing with people. Do you need someone to read the Bible for you, or are you able to interpret it yourself? Think of it this way: if this is a holy document created by the one true God that has been passed down for 2,000 years and still has the core message and the gospel, and all the epistles, and all the books, plus or minus a few depending on denominations and Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant. But any of those Bibles you'd be able to read through, apply the lessons in them, and reach sanctification. That is a simple truth. That is a faith claim. And there's a huge conversation people have about the origin of the Bible, if it's even, you know, reliable. Is it inspired? It touched over thousands of paid hands in hundreds of languages and dozens of kings and queens. But no matter what, Jesus still is born of Virgin Mary, or born of the Virgin Mary, uh, is the incarnate God, died and rose on the third day, and talked to his disciples afterwards, and taught the apostle Paul to be the Gentile to be the apostle to the Gentiles. No matter what Bible you get, that is the core message: is the gospel, everything up to it, and what we are to do with it. So before you can even make any claims to a believer or non-believer, you have to accept the truth that the Bible is the perfect, inspired works of God. We don't have to explain it. It's a faith claim. That's what sets us apart from everyone else. That I can say that I believe so because Jesus said so is all the justification we need, right? So, where do I get this justification in the Bible? First off, we just covered that the only real explanation you need is the Bible told me. That's all you need to tell anyone for why you believe. Now, you have to produce the verses, you have to produce the story. And you can't do that unless you read the Bible. Or I have, well, whack. I personally struggle learning things on my own without them being explained. This is what I'm trying to do for others and learn myself while doing it. Kind of cool that way. I personally learned from Les Feldick, who has hundreds and hundreds of videos online that you can watch. And all he does is read the Bible and reference all of the cross references in the Bible and creates a story and an understanding verse by verse, story by story, and then by each book. I'm not saying you have to go to somebody else to learn, but if you struggle sitting down and pulling anything out of the Bible, it's really good to go to elders. Okay. So that elder needs to produce what the verses are. And I'm not claiming to be that, but if you want to be specific, Leviticus 18:22 and Leviticus 20:13. But Nash, I hear you say, aren't you always about how the Old Testament Levitical law was applied to the Jews and not to modern day Gentiles? Yes, and we are dead to the law. The law was only put here to show how bad and how often and how many different times we can mess up. And the Jews ran away with the Ten Commandments. And we found, or the Israelites at the time, and we found out all these other different ways that we could possibly fall short of the glory of God. There's no way you can follow all those over 400 laws, I think. There's no way you can even do the 10 commandments. And I'm sorry, most of Christians are even failing at the two greatest commandments. I hear you. But whose church is this? It's Paul's church. Did Paul have anything to say about this? Well, if you watch the first episode, I talked about how Paul was a sitting member of the Sanhedrin, or at least a high acting agent. He was a voting member, so either a high acting agent or a member himself. Also, he would have to be married with children. That's all in context, right? So those are all Levitical things right there. Married with children in order to be a part of the Sanhedrin or the elders or whatever, right? So that means that if Paul was following Levitical law, he was following all of Levitical law. Keep that in mind. Now, as Jesus is the perfection of the faith, he is the fulfillment of the old covenant in the offering of the new covenant, starting with the kingdom gospel with the Jews and then passing on the um, gospel of grace to Paul. Paul, my wife actually pointed this out to me. Don't tell anyone. But the Bible is God spoke and the Bible became. It is the word. Jesus taught Paul directly after he ascended. So after the sacrifice and after he came down, he taught Paul himself, meaning that Paul is the natural extension of the gospel of Jesus Christ. He has the authority given to him by Christ to be the premier teacher to the Gentiles. That's you and me, most likely you too. I already said that. Everybody watching this is probably going to be a Gentile. Okay? So the master teacher to the Gentiles, following Levitical law, which forbade a man lying with a man, for is an abomination, would also go on to say in Romans to the new pagan Gentiles, if you want to look it up, Romans 1:26 through 27, and 1 Corinthians 6:9 through 10. Okay, so in the New Testament pagans, he specifically was talking in Romans 1:26 to the New Testament pagans, and more specifically to 1 Corinthians 6:9, when Corinthians says a lot of good stuff, especially when it comes to certain types of sin. Malakoi was an effeminate partner or a passive partner. Paul using the Greek. And then arsenokoitai, arsenokoitai, I promised I did practice this, is men who lie with other men. Paul will go on to say that we are supposed to be set apart from the world. That word is hagiosmos. So let's put all this in perspective. Paul, a member of the Sanhedrin, or at least high acting agent, who followed Levitical law, would understand that the Jews would also live separate from the law of the Gentiles, which would include the homosexuality and the promiscuity, not to mention the prostitution necessary for worship. He groups that all together and says, this is what we are not supposed to do, referencing that he is not to lie with a man with another man. Remember that they say that in 1820 or Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13, and Paul says the same thing in 1 Corinthians 6:9-10. Okay? So it is obvious that Paul, in his they got three verses for you, three separate, nope, just two different verses. That's all is needed. If he says it once, then it's true. You don't need to compile mountains of evidence. And honestly, your opinion doesn't matter on what the Bible says. The Bible clearly says it. Cool. Now that we can agree with that, what is a practical takeaway with that, and why is it so important? Many denominations, at least the one that I'm a part of, and that's a Wesleyan denomination, sanctification is necessary to be a member of the church, let alone clergy. Sanctification is the search of good and the rejection of sin. Sanctification is not that you become perfect and never sin again. It's you do not desire sin. You don't find gratification in doing sin. You don't rationalize to allow sin to happen. Do we see what I'm getting at here? So, if you want a spicy bullet, here's one for you. Paul himself, the apostle to the Gentiles, would not approve same sex marriage in the church or couples who are same sex marriage in clergy. You need to be sanctified. And if your identity identifies with sin before Christ, you are not sanctified. If, like it says in Romans and Revelations, where men and women will give way to their natural desires, meaning they will start having unnatural relations. This is what we're talking about. So it doesn't matter what the world says is right and wrong. The Bible tells us what is right and wrong. And if you cannot believe the Bible is true and that you need to read and learn it, then you're not a biblical Christian. If you don't believe Jesus of the Bible, you believe in a different Jesus than me. And my Jesus is taking me to heaven. A lot of Jesuses that I see today are just gratifying and rationalizing sin. That the Bible is too old, or it was written in a different time, or it's a different perspective. If you as a Christian cannot agree that the Bible is a perfect instruction guide, is not, if you cannot agree that it is wholly inspired, then you are not the same Christian as me. And that's okay, but I'm not taking advice from you. Your right and wrong is not my right and wrong. My right and wrong comes from Paul, an extension of the gospel as the apostle to the Gentiles. If you contradict Paul, you're not the same Christian as I. My Jesus is taking me to heaven. And if your Jesus is rationalizing for you, validating, gratifying your sin and pride in lust, in homosexuality, and promiscuity, you're not the same Jesus as mine. I'll take that to the Bible. So this is a little bit of a shorter one, kind of a thicker one, but thanks for sticking around. This one should be really fun to share with your friends and have conversations with. I encourage you to do that. But remember, if you know all secrets of man, but speak no love, you're no worse than a clanging cymbal. Thanks for joining me this week, and I'll see you next week. I think I'll pick back up with 1 Corinthians 13, but you guys let me know. All right.